Alright, sup fellow citizens, welcome back to the Path of Rage. I am your host, Rage at Games, and this is a rather chunky segment of our Star Citizen coverage. There is a lot going on right now, a lot to cover because of CitizenCon that just went by. There's a bunch going on with 4.0. I simply can't cover it all in a decent amount of time on one video a week. So for right now, I'm going to finish up covering what they went over in CitizenCon, and then next week we'll pick up with the state of the 4.0 and the 3.2, patches and whatnot. In any case, we got a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. Now, CitizenCon just went by a couple of weeks ago, and I already had last week's video on the Squadron 42 gameplay demo and my thoughts on it afterwards, and I hope you watched it. And if you haven't, go check that out. Now I'm going to cover the other panels that they showed throughout the two-day event, touching on the ones I find the most important, and then going over the other ones a little bit more briefly. This is very much a summary of the most important points that stood out to me. It is by no means a comprehensive coverage of everything that was said over the course of 2 days and 10 hours of video or something like that. So I will link all of the individual videos and the panels that they had in the description below. And I highly suggest that you guys watch them for yourselves to get the full context. With that out of the way, first thing I want to talk about was the panel on what they called Genesis and Starchitect. It's the updates to the current engine. The procedural planet generation has been updated. This is now named Genesis. And the tools for making procedural planets have been updated in a way that allows them to actually create a large amount of planets, moons, and other locations on them throughout the game that will be able that they can do in a reasonable time frame, considering how much they have to do. Planet generation will now use data sets that CIG is laying out for each location, and these things include like temperature, soil quality, composition, altitude, the tilt of the planet axis in relation to its local star, the humidity, cloud cover, and all of this goes into the procedural generation of planets. This not only includes the flora and the fauna, but also buildings, farms, outposts, anything that would make sense to be in each particular location. This panel got seriously into the weeds in just how much data will be going into the creation of these planets going forward. And it also showed off 3 new biomes: a swamp biome, a jungle biome, and a redwood biome that all look spectacular, and I can't wait to see them. There's no doubt about it, everything they showed off here was an improvement even over the Star Engine demo from last CitizenCon, which in and of itself was very, very impressive. One thing I think is really worth mentioning here is that the new Genesis systems are much better at blending areas together, resulting in far less of the tiling effect that can be seen with the current tools and in the current builds. That effect that when you're flying down from orbit and you see the trees, they almost look like they're lined up in a grid pattern. It's sometimes really noticeable, and when it is, I personally find it really immersion breaking. What they showed here at CitizenCon looked like a major improvement to me, with the various areas and biomes blending together a lot more seamlessly. Weather is driven by all of these data sets as well, so a rainforest will have a ton of rain, not just because it's a rainforest, but because the local conditions enable the growth of a rainforest, which is why it'll be placed there procedurally in the first place, not because of some arbitrary random placement. Clouds will have also been improved and now actually form and dissipate naturally, as opposed to just giant moving blocks across the sky, and they will affect the visibility of an area they pass over, blocking the sun when heavy with rain, for example. This will also be accompanied by higher winds and lightning and storms, as the clouds are now fully tied to the dynamic weather system. As I mentioned earlier, Genesis will handle the placement of locations on the planets as well, not just the biomes. Going from the current 10 or so locations at each of the planets in Stanton Ave to hundreds and thousands. These will be set in clusters, so players don't have to be constantly traveling around large distances to get to a new area to explore. Different areas and gameplay loops will be available close at hand to major locations, and again, this is called a cluster. On top of that, you have clusters of these clusters, which will be called a sector, and each sector will contain hundreds of locations, with CIG showing a planet that had over 3,000 locations just on one side of the planet. You scale that up to a multi-planetary system, and the potential for viable gameplay space in Star Citizen honestly somewhat staggers me at that point. You're talking about a level of viable, interesting gameplay space that's just on another level. There was quite a bit more to this panel, obviously, than what I'm summarizing here. Again, I suggest you go watch it. It showed that lightning can in fact knock out shields and even knock out starter ships if a powerful enough bolt hits them. Again, a lot of this was very, very cool and was very, very impressive. The next major point for me came mostly at the end, but this was when they were talking about Star Citizen 1.0, when the game actually becomes a released game. This was an hour and 30 minutes long, roughly, and it went into very good detail on what the game will look like, and then how the full 1.0 release will have improved performance, more polished experience, finished gameplay loops, and more importantly, no more resets. One really big change here in this panel was the topic of the promised 100 unique systems in the game, with the 1.0 release only having a total of 5 now. The reason for this is that the 100 systems idea was before the implementation of the procedural planets. The verse went from having roughly 96 to 100 points of interest in a system entirely, all of which were meant for those of you who weren't around, and those of you who will remember this. All of these were meant to be accessed through loading screens. There was video of a constellation going through the atmosphere and landing. You were not in control of the ship. It was a loading screen cinematic, and then you were at the landing zone. 3.0 and procedural planets changed that entirely. That ability to go anywhere on a planet, land anywhere on a planet, has led back to this scaling of total systems on release. Because if they did the 100 systems, you think about it, if they did the 100 systems without procedural systems, then what we would have had was something like Elite Dangerous, where when they did put out planets, they were nothing but empty, rocky planets. There was nothing to them. There was nothing on them. I think that's still the way it is in Elite Dangerous. Please correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments below. I haven't played that game in years. I don't really mind this scaling back on the total systems on release, because they are going to add more as development goes on in the future. But we'll have less systems. We'll have a far more vast amount of gameplay space available to us in comparison, even on fewer planets. I think anyone who didn't really see this coming, the moment they showed off working procedural planets back in the day, I think anyone who just didn't see this coming has been deluding themselves, to be quite honest. There was no way in hell we were going to get 100 systems procedurally generated with anything close to the fidelity that CIG was going for in everything else. It would have been even worse than what we got with Starfield. Now, they have been saying that there will be a main story added to Star Citizen in order to help onboard new players into the systems of the game. This will be done at the player's own pace, and players will be introduced fairly organically to new gameplay loops, with missions introducing players to new ships, guilds, mission givers, and mission types along the way. People will be able to find blueprints for, say, to build a ship, but in order to do it, they'll have to mine resources, which will put them into the mining gameplay loop, and then refining, and then maybe moving some cargo to get the resources to actually build the ship. It will all kind of organically guide the players through the various systems in the game as they feel like playing it out. The Academy of Science Guild, for example, will offer a wide variety of missions, such as capturing animals, rescue and firefighting, scanning areas, farming and crafting, and players will want to do these missions not just for the reputation and the money, but also to eventually achieve what CIG described as citizenship in Star Citizen, which will allow even further endgame gameplay loops such as base building and land ownership. You won't be able to own land in high security and even, I think, medium security areas if you don't have citizenship and a land claim or something like that. I think that's how it's going to work. It'll be interesting to see. A lot of this is going forward on the way to 1.0, so a lot of it's going to change, but this is finally the direction that Star Citizen is going. Again, this is a panel I highly recommend you guys watch if you really want to know what type of game Star Citizen is going to be. Another nice thing about this panel that was great to have was they finally cleared up ship insurance for us. There are 3 levels of insurance. They will pay out credits for the ship lost based on age and wear of the ship. Level 1 will get you the cost of a new chassis in credits when claiming a ship, but not the components or anything stored within the ship. Level 2 will include the chassis and the components, and Level 3 will include everything you had in the ship, including decorations. Again, that's a credit value payout. Now, on top of insurance, ships will also have warranties, which will fully replace the ship as opposed to a credit payout, which is similar to kind of what we have now in the PU. Here's the important thing. Any ship that has been bought with real money will have level 1 insurance and a warranty by default, with players having to purchase level 2 and then 3 insurance in-game with in-game currency to get the replacement on the other items. But pledge store real money bought ships will have level 1 insurance and a warranty by default. You will always get your full ship back no matter what. Insurance will be one of the major money sinks that CIG uses to control the overall economy in Star Citizen. There has to be a reason to spend your money, otherwise the game becomes pointless after all. We'll see how this goes. They'll obviously have to do a lot of work in balancing how this goes. Another thing that they added about this is that there will now also be a ship retrieval shuttle. This will be a shuttle that will take you back to the ship you just lost if you want to try and fix it or if it was still flyable. Maybe you got killed on a planet on foot with your ship parked right nearby by an enemy NPC. Well, now you got a shuttle that will take you right back to your ship. Same thing where if pirates have looted it or whatnot. If it may be still flyable, or if you can bring some stuff with you to do the minor repairs necessary, you might be able to get your ship going again and get it repaired, or get it towed by a helpful player instead of having to claim it and wait for the timer, especially for a big ship. I think this is going to be a cool thing. This doesn't mean, however, that claim timers are going away. They're still going to be a thing, but small starter ships will have very small and negligible claim times, while large and capital ships will have a substantial claim time on them. Pardon me. Reflecting the game world build times of these vessels. It stands to reason if you have an Aurora that are mass-produced Volkswagens of the universe, yeah, you're going to get one right away. They're probably sitting around everywhere. If you've just lost your capital ship, your Polaris, those are a bit harder to come by. It's going to take a bit longer. Another part of the endgame that was discussed quite a bit in depth was for players and orgs being involved in a constant tug of war over shield technology for ground settlements, a system that can be taken over by one group of players only to lose it to another. There'll be time frames and whatnot for how long you can have them and what you have to pay and the resources you have to bring in to keep using them. But these shields will be a way to keep your settlement or rebel base safe from others and will be highly sought after in low security areas, really catering to the PvP side of org play. This will actually extend into orbit as well, as CIG also showed off org space stations. That these can be built by players. They will require vast amounts of resources to acquire and will almost certainly be regulated to extremely large org play as opposed to solo or even small groups. These stations had all the crafting and building loops that players could want, with CIG even appearing to show that these player-owned stations could possibly even build capital ships like the Bengal carrier. Now, we'll see how that one goes. That is obviously far in the future of development. Again, this is all talking about what 1.0 is meant to be. We're still working on 4.0 and server meshing. All of this is great, and all of this has got some work already going into it, but we're not there yet, so let's not get overly excited. Now, apart from the Squadron 42 demo, for me, those were the standouts for me at this year's CitizenCon. There were a few other panels that I'll touch on briefly here in comparison, but they just weren't as big a deal from my perspective, or are very much speculative, and I'm taking more of a wait-and-see approach. Again, what I just talked about with the base building for org space stations, that's always also very speculative. We'll wait and see. But anyway, one cool update they showed off was to the face over IP tech, which looked to work far more smoothly than it currently does, and will make a nice quality of life update to the game, especially for player-to-player interactions. They also showed off a lot of the new social features, such as party and org scheduling, groups, blocking players, inviting people, etc. As I've said before, I am mainly a solo player, so I honestly tend to tune all of this out when I deal with whatever is in a game when I come across with it. When I come across people that are talking to me in game, I will talk to them. I don't generally join orgs. So again, I know that I am not among the majority, especially when talking about MMOs, which Star Citizen is eventually going to be. So I highly suggest that those of you who are really into the whole social aspect of this game, watch this entire segment for yourself. Again, links to all of these panels in the descriptions below. The Dress to Kill panel was all about armor and clothing, and now mixing armor and clothing will be a thing in game. Stats of these wearables will of course determine how much protection they offer, so a leather jacket is not going to be overly useful in a gunfight or on a planet with insane temperature differences, for example. Armor types will have meaningful differences now, giving players reasons to choose one type over the other, depending on their goals. Going into a bunker to clear out some bandits, yeah, heavy armor is a great choice, but it might not have zero-G thrusters, making it much less useful in a low-gravity combat situation. Other armor may provide better protection against G-forces, better scanning, etc. Like all of this, getting the player to think about what to take with them, what equipment to use, instead of just having one, to-go set at all times. They did have a panel on crafting and base building, and while it looks intriguing, this is one that I'm not giving a ton of time to at the moment. By all means, check out the full video for yourself, but I've been hearing about crafting for far too long to get hyped about it just yet. The concepts are cool. The way they laid it out with the various construction drones and vehicles that will be required to build a base, that you'll likely have to pay insurance on your property if in a high security area, the overhead, third-person view that players enter while laying out their settlement. All of it sounds and looks great on paper. On this one, I am simply going to wait and see, because everything they said on this panel might be what they're going for, and it might all change absolutely completely. Again, check this panel out if you're really interested in the base building, but I advise you all, temper your expectations. I don't think this is coming anytime soon. They, of course, showed off some new vehicles, as well as updated us on the Pioneer. First was the big show, star of the show was the Star Lancer, a new multi-crew ship with crafting and building modules, tons of cargo and crew space, med beds, and the absolute worst forward view from a ship in the game, bar none. I can't stand I can't stand the Star Lancer, the Starfarer, the Freelancer. I cannot stand that slit of a cockpit viewport that they have. No matter how much I like the ships, otherwise that ruins it for me. If you're down with that ship, it looks like it's going to be an epically good multi-crew, almost do everything spaceship. You know, it might interest you down the line. There was a couple of new ground vehicles that were designed specifically for base building and cargo, and they had like drones on them that could build certain size structures or whatnot. Numerous silhouettes of ships in progress that are currently in development. They updated the Pioneer to basically now it's a flying base that can build space stations and outposts and all of that. Again, this is all in the building and crafting thing. I'm taking it with huge amounts of salt. I've said it before and I'll say it again. When it comes to ships and Star Citizen, I refuse to spend more than the cost of a normal video game on Star Citizen, as much as I'm down with this project, until it is actually released, and I suggest you do the same if you want to back this project. I look at these new ship announcements in general and I think, cool, something I can earn in-game one day, because to me that's the point of the game. Anything else to look into the specs of these ships and what the possibilities and can I fit these vehicles into it, anything else is to tempt FOMO for no good reason in my mind. They will eventually be in the PU, and I'll try them out then. Usually 3 months after they're available to buy on the pledge store. Again, I leave your spending your spending choices up to you. I do like hearing about new ships. I like the new Titan. I may end up getting that in game, but you know, I don't put too much stock in the ship announcements. We're constantly getting new ships. It's great. It's how they fund the game. It's not my focus. And finally, we were shown an updated version of Leski, now in an asteroid instead of what looked more like a small moon back in the day, and it's looking quite awesome in my view. Along with a brief first look at the Castra system, which is a system on the verge of Xi'an space. These are the two other systems that are going to be released with 1.0, along with Stanton and Pyro. So Stanton, Pyro, Nyx, Castra, and eventually I believe it was Terra that we're going to get. Then this panel was more of a tease, some neat concept art, whatnot, like, but not really a whole lot to talk about with these systems, as they're still being built. Leski was cool. It was nice to see a long-standing feature of the persistent universe from back in the day until it was removed, to see the update on that. I'm looking forward to checking it out in person. It now looks like it's going to be much more expanded and more to do on there in the asteroid. Yeah, it looks like it goes right through the asteroid as well, unlike before. So yeah, I'm looking forward to checking that out. All of this stuff at CitizenCon was great to hear. It's cool to have something to look forward to. It's great that Star Citizen 1.0 has been laid out and CIG has said, here's what we want this game to be. Now we all know this is the game that they are building. It was always up in the air. They never really laid it out. They just kept saying, we're working on this system or that one. Now we know what they're planning, what they're working for. Hopefully when Squadron comes out, it kicks ass. and funding comes in and allows them to complete Star Citizen at 1.0 and beyond, and add everything in that we all want in this game. But in the meantime, that is our rather long update for as much information as squished down as I could, but still rather long update for CitizenCon that just went by in the latest in Star Citizen news. But in the meantime, that has been the update for this week, covering very, very, very squished down all the talking points and panels from Star Citizen or CitizenCon that just went by. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found some information in there that has piqued your interest. I do suggest you go watch the videos for yourself and make your own opinions. Give me a thumbs up if you thought I did a good job on this video. Subscribe if you're new to help me grow the channel and you want to see more. And until next time, I've been Reject Games, and I'll see you in the verse. Bye-bye.